Welcome back to our growing experiment. We're here with Liz from the Nickel Refillery. She's going to tell us a little bit about her business and what she's doing, how she got into it. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I am one of the founders of the Nickel Refillery here in Sudbury, Ontario. It was really a business model that was born from wanting to do more and wanting to develop essentially a toolkit for people to reduce waste. Things that I myself couldn't find locally or anywhere within this area. It really is what drove it to happen. There were a number of people who came and went and still are here that have helped develop it. It's really just about the idea of wanting to do more and wanting to reduce single-use plastic. Like that was always the goal, and it's grown into something even bigger than that. Anything bigger than what I could have imagined it being, to be honest. I think really naively, went into it thinking, okay, we just need to make a space where we can reduce single-use waste, and we need to have X, Y, and Z because these are things we can't get waste-free right now. And then I'm sure other people will be interested too. And, we went into it quite naively, I would say, with a vision to, like I said, bring this toolkit to life. And it's grown significantly since that point. And, I think we just keep getting more and more inspired as it goes. So it's really cool.
So you said it got started because you were inspired and you wanted to do more. So when you talked about wanting to do more, why did you feel like you had to do more? What led you to that part?
Yeah, I guess we should start from the beginning. Hey, as I was working as an RN in the emergency room for the past decade, I would say about a decade at that point. I had just had my first son and was wrapping up my master's degree in public health. And I started paying more attention to the fact that my garbages were always filled with plastic. Like that's all there ever was. It was, and not just there, but everywhere. It was in the emergency department is where it really became apparent to me. And I got to a point where I was like looking at bottles and seeing full garbage cans full of plastic bottles that I was told don't get recycled, and there was nothing that we could do about it. And, it just started weighing really heavy on me. And as I was finishing my master's and I just brought this little new human into the world, I started wondering what I could do different. I just started thinking about, okay, how can I live a little differently to make sure that there's this beautiful place that I'm experiencing left for my son, when he gets older, and as our other children now that we have get older. I started just thinking of it in terms of what was I doing to make the world a better place. Like that's the fundamental aspect of it. And and so from that it just sort of spiraled. We started with a few Masters of Public Health students that were working, doing their practicum. I was on mine as well. And we just started talking like, hey, why don't we just ask restaurants to, reduce their single-use waste? Like, what if we say, hey, can you ask people if they need it instead of just automatically putting it in the takeout bags, since it's going home anyway. And we started talking about that, and it just sort of spiraled into this thing called Plastic Free Greater Sudbury. And what we started thinking about was, how do we make it marketable? How do we make it so that people want to engage with it, so that they are inspired and interested? And it's not just this sort of, at the time, this was a few years ago now, and people sort of see movements in the green world, as I say, like as radical, right? Because it makes people question their everyday life and question the things that they're used to doing and comfortable doing without having to think about it, right? But as soon as we sort of ask people, hey, can you, think about what you're buying and how you're buying it and what you're using it for, sometimes people can get a little bit like, I don't want to change. So I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear it or see it. And so we really put a focus on making it relatable, to be like, hey, yeah, there's no such thing as perfect. Even for me, somebody who's helped develop this, like there's no such thing as perfect in this world yet. It's too difficult to be completely zero waste. And so the idea is just to look at what you can do, make it the changes that are sustainable for you, that you can sustain, and go from there. So with plastic free kind of moving forward, we were able to get more than a dozen local schools and a number of restaurants and businesses to reduce, pick 3 things that they could reduce. So the goal was like, oh, we're going to, instead of offering plastic spoons to stir, we're going to just have some metal ones here. That'll be one change. The other change we'll commit to is like reducing. We won't just automatically put napkins in people's bags and stuff. We'll say you have to ask for it, or even just removing individual sugar packets, and having like the refillable ones. So that would be, say, 3 things that a business would commit to. And then we'd give them like a decal for their window. And you may see the decals in some areas of the city. It's still, a lot of people still have, it was called Pledge for Sudbury. So from that, what we were learning at the markets and stuff was that people didn't have the tools though to reduce waste. And we are like telling people, hey, you can do it. Like, let's just be a little more mindful with these things. And people were like, yeah, but like half the stuff in my garbage is from X, Y, and Z. And like, there's nowhere to refill it or nowhere to even, get it. And so here we were kind of at a loss because we're like, all right, we don't have the tool. People don't have the toolkit they need to make these changes. And so with our relatable approach, the Nickel Refillery was born as that place to be the toolkit. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. I didn't know that whole the backstory and that the plastic free Sudbury thing. That's really cool. And the way you said it exactly to me is something that like once you get it, you kind of like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like a lot of the different stuff that we have that are single use plastics. If you want to talk about just for having more plastic like out in the dump and wherever it's going to be, right? Like it just doesn't make any sense to do that. And like when you're saying that too, it also makes me wonder, like, why we started moving to so much more plastic. Like you think about, say, like beer bottles, we still wash those all the time. Why do we have Coca-Cola in plastic bottles? Like, couldn't we have kept doing the glass bottles? Like, I would guess probably a lot of them get broken in shipping, and there's probably like, there's some kind of like logistical, like kind of explanation for it.
Oh, for sure.
But you got to kind of think like, how many times can you reuse that bottle? You must be able to reuse it a lot. And then it's much easier to melt down glass and repurpose it than it is to do with a lot of plastics, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And I'll tell you, just because over these years with the Refillery, I've learned a lot. And here's like a couple questions to think about. So like you think of the Coca-Cola bottle, okay? And there's a lot of reasons why they would have gone to plastic, right? And not only because plastic's cheap, right? Really easy to produce, quick to produce, low cost in all aspects, aside from the environmental, obviously. It's cheap to ship, right? Because like shipping drinks is already heavy, right? Like water, like fluids are heavy to ship. So you throw in the weight of a glass bottle on top of that, that's even more, right? And so more costs for shipping, also more emissions, right? And it is something we have to be mindful of when we go all glass, right? In the sense that it is a bigger carbon footprint to make glass. There's no question compared to plastic. But that's only looking at that one angle, right? It's not looking at the fact that like plastic is petroleum derived, right? It's coming from carbon. So I think there's a lot of angles to look at these problems, and that's what makes them so complicated. There's pros and cons to so many of these issues. So here's the other question that you have to think about with the Coca-Cola thing, right? So we want to keep these glass bottles for refilling, but like where do they get refilled with Coca-Cola? Like if you don't have that locally or regionally, like where does it go, and where do you have to ship it to another country to get it refilled? Like would that make sense, right, emission wise?
Right.
So there's a lot of question marks with that, and so you can see why the plastic made sense, right? It was like cheap and efficient to ship, and people could just chuck it out and they're not really at a loss, right? The company doesn't have to be at a loss at that point. And here's the biggest challenge though, is that it leaves the people with an environmental crisis, so that they can keep the money in their pockets, right? And I think that's something we really have to think about when we're buying products. What do we want to support? What kind of world do we want to live in? And what kind of world do we want to put our money into, right? And when we buy these plastic Coca-Cola bottles, like, I mean, we're all at the mercy of whatever's available to us. That's the challenge, right? So
Yeah.
if someone wants Coca-Cola and the only option for them is in plastic, it's either you're going to refuse it or you're going to buy maybe the biggest bottle, to try to reduce a few of the smaller ones. But there's always that trade-off, right? And so it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, that's another thing. Like when you started talking about the real logistics of it there, like that's something you don't really consider, because like the better case scenario, I guess, for you, especially when it comes to glass, is exactly like how it is at the Nickel Refillery, right? Where you come in with your glass jar, and I mean, if you take care of that jar, I guess you could use it your whole life.
Totally, and that,
I mean, hand it down to the next generation.
Yeah.
This is great grandmother's laundry detergent jar.
What's really funny is like we definitely have had customers come in and say like, you see this, or we'll admire a bottle and they'll be like, this was my mom's bottle and we've always loved it. We always wanted to put it to use. And here we are. Now we're putting our maple syrup in it every week. We put a little bit of alcohol through it, cleaned it out, and like now it's going to go on forever, and so it's really cool because these stories sort of come from bottles as well. It's not just this one thing. It's like, I find that's really part of the community that's developed in the refillery, is that like there's these stories behind everything everybody's doing and the bottles they're using and the reasons they're refilling. And I just find that to be the most inspiring part of what we're doing, to be honest, is the sense of community that's been built through this place. It's so much more than a retail shop. And that was always the goal, because this place was not built to be like it is a business, obviously, but it was built from passion and from change drive, change making. And I think that's really what hopefully emulates throughout the space, when people are shopping as well. But yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of aspects to look at and a lot of angles to look at when we're doing this. But when you look at a refillery, that is why we put the focus so heavily on reusing. And it's because when we look at buying new and even, tapping into what's already there is the only, right? Even when it comes to plastics, like we try to educate customers even about, sometimes we'll bring in recycled plastics and people will say, oh, well, that's plastic still. And we tell them, the reason we do that, like sort of the solution to plastic is through plastic. in my humble opinion, I may be wrong here, but there's so much of it at this point that I don't know there's got to be other ways. But in my humble opinion, I think that a big way to get out of it through it, right, is to figure out how to use it to our advantage. And that might be using it in infrastructure and I don't know what, but plastic, it's here forever. So we're going to need to figure out some pretty innovative solutions to get rid of it, or to at least find a purpose for it, right? Even with the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about like even just on a small scale at your house, what you can do with it. Like we follow somebody, this Pure Gardener, and she uses plastic yogurt cups or K-cups to put her seedlings. Yeah. So she's using it, right? So it's a good point what you said, like it's here, so what are we going to do with it?
Exactly. And I hate going down sort of that tunnel where it's like talking about the negatives of plastic, because it's like I want to assume most people know that plastic's a problem at this point, right? It's not just the waste aspect, it's the toxicity of it too, right? It's the fact that it's derived from petroleum and made with a lot of synthetic chemicals, right? And so when we're using it and it's slowly degrading, like it's going somewhere, right? Like it's not, we may not be drinking, but it's going into our soils, it's going into our water streams. It's going into our air. It's in every aspect of everything. I mean, there are research studies, that say that they found it in salt at this point. Like it's so far spread, right? That if we don't start, paying attention to how we shop and where we're putting our money into, or what kind of initiatives we're putting our money into to make these changes and to sustain these changes, then we're going to be left with like quite a problem, and we already have one. So let's look at how this new type of economy, a circular economy, can help support not only the community, the environment, but also the economy. It's, there are a lot of aspects to this movement that are bigger than just reducing waste. There's lots of research out there, even in Canada, that says, it's good for the economy because we're going to be making more jobs with this innovation that we have to do, right? So reducing, recycling, there's a number of different avenues that we can tap into for job and economic growth. And obviously the environment is a big one, but community as well, right? Less food waste, sense of support, knowledge sharing, all of those things are fostered when people come together to make change. And I've seen that firsthand, and we see it every day at the Refillery. And it's really the main reason we're still here is that sense of community, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does seem like there's definitely people who, like you, they want to do a little more, right? And then that's where we kind of tried to help with the podcast a little bit, is like maybe because we had a lot of questions too, and we figured, like these people seem to have answers to a lot of these questions that we have, right?
Definitely.
So we talk to people and get some of these answers to some of these questions. And then the other thing with the community part that you mentioned too, another thing that really strikes me about the Refillery, every time I've went in there, very, very friendly. And also too, like you go in there and usually, especially if it's not like too busy, someone come up and say, hey, do you want like a hand? I'll help you fill up your stuff. Mm-hmm. And then it's like 2 minutes, your stuff is full and like you're out the door. And Sophia mentioned something that I hadn't really considered before, but she said like, it might be kind of intimidating for a person going to like a Refillery, because it's like, what do I do when I'm here? Like, how do I do, like, like
totally
have a bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like, that's definitely something we come across a lot. Like, even in the day to day, when I'm just kind of out and about and people are like, oh, so what do you do? And I sometimes have to explain it to people. And the problem is that when you're in it, right. And just like, I'm sure your experience, like when you're in it and you're doing all the research and you're living it day to day, you just assume everybody knows it. Right. And everybody must have heard of it and knows of what, but what we realize is that it's actually a fairly foreign concept to most people until they come in and experience it. And so we're quite aware of that. We really pay attention to that fact and have some ideas for people when they first come in. So we often tell people just to walk around the first time, just to get a sense of like what we actually do there. And not to even shop, not to buy anything, but just to sort of take it all in, because there is a lot there. And we're always expanding and trying to tap into other areas of life to help people support and reduce the waste that they might be accumulating. So, from food to personal care to DIY to, anything. So yeah, with that said, it can be quite intimidating for people who have never, ever even thought of it. Right. But the beauty of this circular economy and movement is that once it's very difficult to unknow because you start to see it, or you can't help but pay attention to the plastic and the waste that comes off of all the different products you buy. And people start to, come in, and a lot of times they'll say, well, I had heard about it, but it was a little on the edge, but after garbage day, like, I just can't do this anymore. I need some ideas here, and I need something that, fits within my budget, or something that fits within my lifestyle, or I have 4 kids and I don't know how I'm supposed to manage this. Right. And so I think it's important to keep that conversation going, because we all come from such different walks of life. And there is a level of intimidation for any of us that have to make those kind of changes in our life, right? When we're used to such a convenient sort of lifestyle, right? And suddenly you have to be a little more mindful. But I think the goal of the Refillery is to not put that pressure on people to change every aspect all at once, right? It's all about slow, mindful transition, right? And a lot of times I just tell people to start with dish soap. I find the easiest one. It's the one that most people can afford to get a little bit of dish soap to try out. And if it works for them, then it becomes a bit of a domino effect where they're like, well, what else could I do? And what else can I do? And we do try to find ways to explain to people that the best benefit of refilling is that you don't have to fill your jar. It doesn't have to be full. You don't have to get a full bottle of something to try it. You can try a little bit of everything and see what you like, or say you're a little low on cash for a week and you just need a little bit to get you through, like get what you can afford or get what you need. because not only does it become more affordable in that way, it becomes so you have less waste if you don't like it, or if if it's not for you, or you're allergic to something, right? So there's so many benefits of being able to try things out and get just what you need. So I find that once we have that conversation, people get a lot less intimidated, because the pressure to fill it all the way isn't there anymore. It's like, oh, I could just try a little bit. I never thought of that, So that's the key, is just tapping into what people need out of their lifestyle. Like, I often ask people, like, oh, well, do you have any kids? What's your life like? Like, what kind of things do you use every day? And so I think it's all about getting people to utilize the team to the best that they can. Ask the questions, send us an email. I find that's the key to success here. Yeah.
I also find what I do myself is I go on your website, because that usually seems pretty updated. So then, like recently, I wanted to get a new kind of shampoo for a little one. So I typed in shampoo baby. Okay, they have one. So then, okay, Jordan, can you stop in after work? I'd like to try that. So that's a really easy way to do it too, where you could type in what you're looking for and then be able to see all the information right there.
Yeah, absolutely. You could check out the website and just scroll, see what we have, that you don't have to come in and figure it out, because there's always little things that are hidden, right? So, that's exactly that's the best way. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, that you were talking about, where it's like, you talk to people and it's like, well, have you considered this little thing, or you consider this little thing, where it's like, there might be something in their life that they've never even thought of the fact that they're throwing something out all the time. Right.
Totally.
Like, if it's like, I don't know, you just, when you start thinking that way, like I don't know where I'm kind of getting with that, but it's like,
yeah, it's mindfulness. That's what it is. It's like,
yeah,
you go to a mindful place where suddenly even if you aren't ready to change it, you're paying more attention than you used to be. I think that's the key, is that most of us, I think, until you start thinking about waste, you just sort of just do it. You just buy things as you need them. You throw it away if you don't want it. It just it's mindless, sort of, right? It's just part of life. But then when you start paying attention to the things you're buying and how much of it is, and like you're looking at gram weight and you're like, oh, per gram, it's that. Oh, geez, the one I've been buying is like 5 times that per gram. I never even thought of it, but it came in this cute little bottle and it looked like it was a reasonable price. But and so I think it just makes people more mindful of their purchasing habits, and there's never going to be a negative to that, right? Whether you end up refilling or not, I think being a more mindful consumer is really the key to getting us out of the challenges we have with overconsumerism and just that constant crisis of waste that we're seeing, right? So, yeah. So wherever it leads people, I think it'll be of benefit to be more mindful. Yeah.
Yeah, and like really thinking about like that, but the like buying by the gram and all that kind of thing. When you break it down to like, because then you're thinking about your actual consumption, right? When you start thinking about it in those sort of terms, it makes a lot more sense, and it puts you in the right place to make less waste, because you're going to only get what you need, kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
And if you start thinking about like, what do I actually need? What am I actually buying, and that kind of thing, like those types of decisions, they're going to be less waste, right? And yeah, I mean, like you got to kind of think about that, like how much stuff ends up in the landfill, even from like, say, on the grocery end of things, right? Like you buy a bunch of food or whatever and you think you're going to eat it, but really you're not a person who actually eats that many strawberries. You only actually need like 5 strawberries. I mean,
yeah.
Mind you, when you're going to like a bulk store, usually you're not buying like fresh stuff, you're buying like, dried stuff, but the same principle holds, right? I mean, that stuff usually has a better shelf life, but still.
Exactly.
And like even for us too, because we started buying like our meat locally and stuff too, we're thinking now like, how much meat do we need for a year? Yeah. We don't think like, oh, we need a steak for the weekend or whatever. Awesome. And then and then also too, like in a little way, I guess, of reducing waste, like it's the way it's wrapped up and stuff like that is like paper and stuff like that you can like it breaks down. It's not like styrofoam and all that other stuff, right? So like that's kind of a step in the right direction too.
It is.
I mean, there's some cellophane in there, but I mean, you can't really get away from, it's still meat, right?
Well, that's it. And here's like, that's the thing. You can't, well, I mean, maybe you can in some places of the world, but it's difficult to be perfect at all angles, right? Like when you're thinking about it, am I getting food that's closer to home by farmers who are of my community, and am I helping support, X, Y, and Z labor force by getting the food through them as well, and supporting Science North, having the market there, and and am I spreading it on my social media to get other people and other community members aligned? Like, you got to look at all those benefits too, right? It's not always a single-use waste, right? Sometimes these other issues, like reducing emissions, right? Supporting local and you're supporting your fellow community members is also of equal importance. It's just different, right? So it's difficult to check all the boxes every time, right? So
yeah, well, you even mentioned it earlier about where your money is going, right? Like, who's getting your money? Like, you could buy your Coca-Cola, like we were saying, or if there's companies, businesses that are more local, like you're saying, and then basically you're supporting their family, you're supporting the community that way.
Exactly. Encourage your friends to develop something, right? Like there's all these cool avenues that can come from us refusing something like a Coca-Cola bottle. It's like, oh, but I really love that fizzy taste. I wish I could get this local, man. Like, somebody could get inspired from that idea and go and create a whole business for themselves that we can now tap into locally, right? Like, from these desires, because it's all about like demand and right. So when there's a need for something, usually people will create it, right? So if people start requesting something locally that we can't get, like, oftentimes there's inspiration that comes from that, and innovation that comes from that. So I really do encourage people, like, to talk about these things, right, with other people, because that's where ideas come from. And it's the key to I think local sustainability, because it's just...
Well, then I like, sometimes I wonder, when we started doing the podcast, we wonder if we're being effective and all that kind of stuff. And maybe we're not always checking all the boxes, and maybe we're not doing a lot, but I think we're in the same spirit of what you're saying, is we're trying to expose people in the area that are more local and local oriented, and we're trying to help promote people in those kind of ways and help out with that. So we try to do our own little part. And like, that's, I like to hear too, from what you're saying, it sounds to me like a lot of people are doing their little part, right? And like what we're doing, anybody can do what we're doing. We're just two people who decided one day, like, we wanted to talk about localism, we wanted to talk about self-reliance, we wanted to talk about growing your own food, and like how you pointed out too, when you talk about, say, reducing waste, it relates to all these other different things. And so, like, when we got into thinking about, like, self-reliance or this kind of thing, health comes right along with that. And then it's like, what are you eating? And then back to your plastic thing too, in some cases, when it comes to the plastic wrapping that we are using for our foods, we are actually eating some parts of those plastic that are breaking down, right?
Really?
And when it comes to even some of our, I guess you call it beauty care products or health, those kind of things, there's a lot of plastics that are in there. And then on top of that, in some cases, there's a lot of chemicals in there too that are having negative effects on your hormone levels.
Yeah, like,
and then
that's exactly
right. Go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. I'm just agreeing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because it's like all these things all kind of radiate out, because that's the other thing too. Like, when you're going to the refillery too, not only are you usually reducing waste because you're reusing your container, you're tending to get something that's more along the natural spectrum, or at least using chemicals that are more agreeable to sort of human biology, which, again, a step in the right direction, right? And like, I like to think those are all kind of little parts that we transitioned into doing more sort of by exposure to the store too. Is like, we're like, oh, we could probably start getting one of these things, and we kind of want to get this stuff anyway too. So then, now we're getting the soap, now we're getting that. And now if you think about it, like, if it has an effect, we haven't really used anything other than like natural soap and shampoo for a few years now. And it's like,
the norm.
I would assume that has like a good effect, because whatever the detrimental effect of the other products we were using is gone now. And from what I understand, in some circumstances, it can be basically epigenetic. So you can actually pass on some of these small changes to your children if, like, say, you're using that product when you're pregnant or whatever, or even when you conceive.
And breastfeed, things like that, right? They find a lot of this stuff, right? So I think it's, and it all just comes back to mindful creation and mindful consumption and stuff, right? So when we source our products, we sort of have this checkbox, right? We're like, okay, where is it made? Who's it made by? Like, can we have a conversation with these people? Like, do we, like, what are their employment standards like? Like, where is this stuff being created? Is it local? Where do they get the materials? Like, for example, something that's always kind of sat on my mind was like bamboo toothbrushes, right? Like, and I just have to bring it up. Like, obviously we sell them because they're an optimal, they're a great alternative to the plastic ones. But it's like, I always question, because I'm like, well, the bamboo definitely isn't grown in Canada, right? Like, it comes from China. That's where it's typically grows and where it's going to be most cost effective to do it. And we had a team member, bring up recently. She was like, these bamboo ones are made in China, and we had a big conversation about it, because I said, yeah, you're right, like they are, and we know that, but let's look at this as a okay. So we have this as a question, right? So what do we want to ask the distributor? Like, what are some things that we would be worried about? Okay, well, where is it manufactured in China? Is there any oversight? Like, what kind of standards do you have in place, and transparency standards do you have in place to help make sure that we're not supporting something that wouldn't be within our ethical or value system, right? And most of I would say all the distributors that we bring in have that level of transparency with their companies that they're employing, right? So some of them actually have gone as far as starting to use materials from Canada and create wooden toothbrushes, like Ola Bamboo, for example, in Quebec, because they are also recognizing that, like, yes, it's an alternative, but is it an optimal alternative? Is there a better way of doing it, and a more sustainable way of doing it that could be more transparent and easier to be transparent about, right? Because obviously, if we're not in the same country of where it's being made, how can you have perfect oversight? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So, you can be told things, you can be, and there's a certain level you may be able to oversee, but it's never going to be perfect, right? So we look more for, like, how do we really know? And we ask those difficult questions to distributors, and it can be really uncomfortable sometimes, and that's what we always want to do. We want to strive to do that. And we want people to feel that when they come into the store, that they can trust the products they're using, because we've done all that hard work for them. So obviously we don't get it perfect every time, and we learn things or things change, but we always are going to be humble and recognize that, we aren't perfect at this, just like we don't expect anybody else to be in terms of customers, but we're always going to do our best to help make sure that it's an easier process to tap into the zero waste toolkit. Because we also recognize that it can't all be on the consumer, like the Coca-Cola problem, right? Like, so because this company wants to pocket more money and pump out their Coca-Cola, they've chosen this avenue, and this is all we can choose. Like, why would we blame the consumer for that? Right? Or expect her to make changes when it's not them making those decisions, right? So I think there needs to be a level of accountability on the distributors and, like, the places we get our meals and our drinks and stuff from, to make those changes that make it easier for consumers to make changes and to live their daily life in convenience, right? Without it being this chronic sort of inconvenient thing to make change, right? So I think the future of the circular economy, especially locally, is, like, to get people who produce waste to take some level of accountability for it, and to help make it easier for the consumer to make those easier choices, those good choices, right? And that might be to a metal spoon instead of having plastic ones. Like, make it easier, right? So, especially
and like you're saying there too, the other part that I definitely like about that is the localism. The other thing is the oversight part too, right? Like, you do know, the closer it is to home, the easier it is to know, like, oh yeah, I know they have, like, good working standards there. Because, like, say in Canada, we have our standards of exactly what is safe in a workplace and what's not and all that. Like, I think we have a good setup for that. So we know that when it comes to people working in Canada, I can't say 100% of the time, right? But, for most of what we know, people are working in safe, respectable conditions, right? And then in lots of other countries, with a lot of things that we're consuming, that isn't the case, right? And so,
never know.
Right. Well, because it actually, to me, brings up another interesting question, because it's like, say in the toothbrush case, like you need toothbrushes and you're trying to find like a better sourced, less waste toothbrush. But in the case of like, say, something like a Coca-Cola, you might be thinking like, well, it's a single-use plastic and all that kind of stuff, but also, is this thing good for me at all? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, maybe it kind of makes me feel good or whatever else for a little bit. And you could maybe make that argument, and then the indulgence and all that kind of stuff, whatever. But it's like, you got to think, is this good for me? Is this something I really want to be a part of? Because like, even when you're consuming stuff, like, we're a super technological society, and think about how like there is a sort of drive in a way for like people to buy a new phone every year. Think about like, the amount of waste we're creating with that. And that is very toxic material that we're dealing with there, right? And that all kind of radiates out even from when you start asking questions about your consumption. What am I consuming and what are the ripple out effects of that? Because like for me, I guess I'm kind of lucky where I haven't really cared about having like a new phone since I was probably a teenager. Like because I remember when we first got like text messaging, like that was the coolest thing. Like I was from a small town, so we got it kind of late too. But like it was like, oh, you had to have the text messaging, and then the smartphones, and it was like, oh, well, now I can play a cool game on here. You got to have that. And then you kind of get the game after a while. Like, oh, no, this phone is now just the same as this next phone and the next phone and the next phone. I don't need to buy a new phone.
Totally.
Right. But some people, they still think like, because there's also a status attached to it and all these other things. But it's like, I don't know. I think like how it's kind of been a theme, I guess, how there's all these things are interrelated. Because I think when you start thinking about how much do I eat, how much do I waste, all this other kind of stuff, then you start thinking about, do I need the phone? Do I need another car? Like, say if we took like, now this has a sort of economic downside to it, but like from the environmental thing of it, like do manufacturers of cars and trucks, say, do they really like change the truck that much from year to year to like warrant like, making new models all the time? Where you could think like, say you make like a solid model and you make that same model for like 5-10 years, right? And then you also have like the part market and stuff like that, which now we're talking about recycling already, right? Because it used to be, even for as bad as the old gas guzzlers were, you could keep one of those old vehicles on the road for 50, 60 years and for cheap. So like it was good for people who didn't have a lot of money, right? And it was sort of recycling in a sense, because that steel frame truck is still rolling around, still carrying people, still doing its job.
Yeah. Now,
mind you, of course, you want the better gas engine, or not a gas engine, or it's all the reduction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, said you grew up in a small town. Like I think it's common to, like, I grew up in a small town too, and a lot of growing up had like kind of older trucks, right? And when I think back, almost all of them had the skills to fix their own trucks as well. Like almost every in their garages were like, it's very uncommon, I feel, to see that, at least in the city aspect. I don't see that like in my own neighborhood at all. Not to say it doesn't happen. Obviously, a lot of people still have those skills, but the fact is, like, it's become easier to just sort of trade it out, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, our whole mindset is sort of around that now, because like I know for older people, like my grandmother especially, everything is like still good. You could still fix it. Like she doesn't throw out anything.
Yeah.
And like nowadays, it's like your shirt gets a little hole in it, you just throw it out. Like, you get like whatever it is that you have now, you don't fix it, you just throw it out. You get a new one. But it's partly because everything's so cheap, right? So like there is no real value in that thing anymore, where you think like, why would you take the time to patch a hole in a pair of jeans? It's like, well, because another pair of jeans costs too much.
It's like, it's time, right? It's like people are like, well, is it worth me sitting here for an hour to fix this, or should I just spend the $5.99 and buy a new one, right? And it becomes like the cost opportunity, right? Almost like people are like, well, my time is worth more doing X, Y, and Z than it is with this. Mm-hmm. And it's the fast consumerism. It's that fast fashion. It's and like it can really go on for it could go on forever. Like, and that's part of the challenge, I think, of the zero waste movement, is that it doesn't stop and end anywhere. It's not like you can start talking about the one thing and then it's sort of like, okay, you can get the knowledge and then it's like done and then we can like work within that field. It's like it taps into every aspect of our lives in every area, every angle, every direction. And nothing is untouched by this movement, right? And it's such a grand scale of change that we're looking at here that it can feel very, oh, what was it? I had heard someone locally, I was talking to a professor about this, and he said eco grief, he called it. It was like, it almost becomes like a sense of people will get this level of eco grief before they even try anything, because it's just such a large topic. It's like climate change and stuff, right? It's these big topics that feel so overwhelming that it's like, as a human, you just almost need to you want to like huddle in place, because you're like, it's just too big. I can't, like, and people will just often check out because they're like, I can't mentally take it. It's too big, too wide scale for me. So what we basically try to do at the Refillery is like to make it fun. We try to make this engaging and supportive and inclusive, and it changed the tone of it being from, okay, well, everybody needs to do this, and we got to do that, and we got to fix this, and we gotta. It's like we over there, we all have that understanding, but we try to make it relatable, and we try to help people take one step at a time and just become a little more mindful, because when we become mindful, we become more mindful of everything. It's not just one thing we become mindful of. And even when it comes to like growing our own food, like I'm sure that has changed you both significantly, right? Being more mindful of like how food grows and what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I'm sure like the planning of it and the preparation is just such an incredible thing, right? And not to say it's always fun. I'm sure there's some major challenges, but the mindfulness of it is what makes us all change. Like you shop now, I don't know if you were shopping at the Refillery before or after, but oftentimes these small changes in our life can be like complete domino and catapult effects to changing our lives in many other positive ways. And yeah, so that's what my overall hope is for this Refillery. And there's always a big vision behind it to try to make it better and easier to manage and easier to shop in, like I know we're a pretty small space there. So hopefully, we can grow one day and make it a little more easy for families to come in and shop. But in the I just hope we can tap into people's resilience in this challenging time we're living in, and just like give some joy and give people a reason to do a little happy dance as they walk out with their new bottles, old bottles, whatever it is. I think there's joy in that, and it does feel good to refill. That's the one thing we have all feel, even to this day, 3 years later. I still feel incredible joy walking out with my box of jars, even though it's such a normal thing for me every day to do. I still feel quite a level of like accomplishment when I can get home and put it into my cupboard and know that I reduced all those things. So yeah.
Well, the other thing that kind of I was just thinking about when you were talking about that, because you're talking about the mindful living and that aspect. The other thing that I think that does is it sort of enlivens sort of everything in your life again. Like everything in your life now becomes a little more special, right? Because it's like that's the your thing, that thing, right?
Totally.
It's like it now has a personality, that kind of thing, and it's partly you've imparted your personality on it, right? But now everything in your life starts to take on much more meaning because it's an essential part of your life now, right? So like it's not just some container that you pour the soap out of or whatever. It's like, no, I need to grab my soap container, because now your relation to the object is entirely different. Yeah. You would never say, I need to grab my laundry detergent.
Yeah.
You would say, I need to grab the laundry detergent, right? So now you're taking ownership of everything that you're touching in your life. And so now, because I think a lot of times, go ahead, sorry?
No, I said that's a great point. I think that's a big part of it too. Yeah.
Well, because I think a lot of times about like I feel like there is some spirit of people where people I don't know, like I don't want to say they don't have hope, but they kind of like we're kind of in a weird transitional period, like as people, right? When it comes to like us we're basically knocking on the door. I mean, we've been a global sort of people for a while now, but we're really becoming much more that in a way we weren't before. Like we're kind of aware of it now.
Well, we're more aware of it, I think, than ever, especially with after post-pandemic, right? We're aware of how connected we really all are. Yeah.
Yeah, and that totally changes everything, right? So like it's actually it's a huge leap is what is happening because it changes again, like how we were talking about the relation that you have now to your soap bottle, right? The relation now that you have as like what you are, who you are, and because it used to be you thought about who you are in relation maybe to your town or your family or your peer group or your city or your nation or whatever, and then you sort of go out to this big whole blue rock flying through space, and you're like, no, now everybody on there, right? So it's I don't know. It's I think like it's a cool time to be in because we're seeing a lot of this change, but it's like I don't know. What's happening like now and has kind of been happening for a while. I feel like is something that has potential to set the a big tone for a few generations, probably. I think.
Yeah. I think there's lots of hope there still for sure. And you know, I think what's the alternative, right? Like what's the alternative? Like we all just throw up our hands and say like, what? Well, like, no, that's not an option. Like that's not what we're here for, right? You know, preserving the environment is fundamental, right? It's a fundamental part of who we are. It's where the natural resources necessary for us to eat, drink, everything are from. So like us not preserving it isn't an option. Like it's the fact that we haven't been is it's sort of mind-boggling, right? And so it's like now that we know, we can't let ourselves unknow. We need to do something about it. So whether that's from a consumer point of view, there's always something we can do as consumers, right? That where our money goes is what drives change, right? So as consumers are, you know, you obviously have a big say in that. What you demand is what will come, right? Just like the Coca-Cola local pop kind of situation, right? It's if there's enough demand, something will change. So with that said, there's always that aspect of our consumerism, but then there's also the aspect of the distributors and like what we demand from them. So if we are demanding it, it will come. It's just, yeah, our voices have to get louder, you know, and we all have to try to take that leap of faith and that make that minor change to start that domino effect to start happening. So yeah, I definitely think for me, you know, having kids has made that a lot more loud because I hear them when they see a problem and they're like, oh, why is that plastic? Why is that on the ground? Or when I get older, I'm going to do, you know, and it just makes me acutely aware of how important it is to do this preservation process and to keep that education and knowledge flowing and to just not lose hope, you know, because there is lots of hope still. So.
Yeah, and I think too for having kids, like you start having like a different time reference, right? Because like even when you're watching the kids grow up and stuff like that, like your relation to how you experience time is totally different too. Like you almost kind of like you don't even think in terms of your own years. You're like, oh yeah, that's when my kid was this old.
Totally.
Yeah, you don't think about it like when I was this old. You're like, oh, they were this old. It's like, well, how old were you? It's like, oh, Christ, I don't know. How old are you? I'm this much older than you. So
all the time.
Right? Like it, yeah.
How old were you? You know, and how old were you when you had, Margot or something? And I'm like, I don't remember. Like this track for sure. It's
But then you're thinking about the future, right? And you're thinking about like, you know, well, hey, where does our food come from? And are we able to keep taking food from that place we could take our food from? And like, you know, how do we maximize the probability of that being a chance into the future, right? And I think, I don't know, like some people think maybe we're kind of behind the ball or we're like slow or we're not enough in time. I feel like, but there is like, I think like to the hope point, right? People are making changes. People are becoming aware of it. It's a lot more now than it was 10 years ago. And like, even like just like it's like it just seems so silly once you start thinking about it. You're like, okay, we all have to live on this planet. This planet has to be healthy because like it's like this is our terrarium. We can't be like shitting in our terrarium and not cleaning it up.
Totally.
Like, you know, we're messy. What we are is we're messy. We're humans. We create problems, but that's good because we also need something to do.
Yeah.
So we've got something to fix. Yeah, we need projects.
Yeah. But
I think we got to pretend we got a lot of work to do, which is a good problem to have actually.
Well, even in the growing your own food aspect, this year when we did our planning, we really thought about the stuff we use the most, like our staples. So we want to do a lot of garlic, a lot of onions, because we ended up wanting to doing a lot of varieties previously, and then we ended up having something in our fridge for a few days, almost being spoiled, just because we're not eating that kind of food, right? It's not part of our diet. So it's really fun the way we're doing it this year, where it's really going to be what we're using.
Yeah, like you pre-plan based on that you'll be able to use and want to use, right? And could find uses for. So that's so cool. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
I definitely that, that mindfulness carries into everything after a while. Like it really is just starting somewhere. You got to start somewhere, and then it will trickle down. You will or trickle up, whatever direction, whatever you end up, you're going to be a little more mindful of it. So I have lots of hope. And, I think back to over these last 3 years, we were only 4 or 5 months old when the pandemic hit, and we didn't even know if we didn't have any employees at that time. We didn't even know, nobody knew what was going to happen. We were like, okay, so the whole world's turning to plastic again. And, and so we did have one employee at the time, and she was like, I'm putting on my battle gear, we're gonna weather this, and I was like, okay, we can do this, and so we just pivoted hard, and we worked with public health, and we were like, okay, can we do these in jars and do deposit programs? And yes, okay, and our website sucks terribly, we got to make an online site, and that sucks too. We don't even know how to do this. But, we pivoted, and we were like, okay, we're going to do this. And still the community showed up, even though we made tons of mistakes, and, our labels looked terrible, and, we didn't know what kind of jars to use. And, but we figured it out, and the community just kept showing up. And the level of hope that gave us at the time was like, okay, we can, people care about this. People want to make change, and people are willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit inconvenienced, or even a lot convenienced to make this happen. It's not just us. And it's not just, this wasn't a new concept, obviously. And I like to bring that back really quick. Just that, as we brought up, most of our grandparents have been known to do wonderful zero waste things every day and still do. And this isn't a new concept. It's just something that we sort of got removed from as the conveniences became so convenient. So it's sort of bringing us back to a place where we're like, okay, but why am I buying that? Do I really need it? And how much of it do I really need? And when we're talking about vices or DIY projects, like who really wants that stuff sitting in your cupboards going bad, right? Most of us just use a pinch or just a couple tablespoons of something. So anyway, just all that to circle back, I think, the fact that people showed up when it was probably the hardest to do says a lot about the fact that it is there, and it will continue to grow if we keep fostering it and keep talking about it. We just can't stop the conversation. So,
yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's showing up every day. It's showing up every day and doing that little part. That's really what adds up to everything, right? And it's all of us doing our own little part. And like you said, the way that we get more people doing less or making less waste is by doing kind of like buying more from people like you say, right? And like for you, like people like you, basically, you kind of like you seen demand basically, and you're like, well, people want to do this, but they don't know where to get it. And then you come in there, which is perfect entrepreneurial thinking, like, hey, I can facilitate that. And the more, and the more that like we start to move towards that, it kind of snowballs, right? Because eventually there's going to have to be like someone else who kind of sees what you're doing, and they think, I wonder if I could kind of do what she's doing there. And then they start up another thing, and that's in another part that services another community or whatever, right?
Well, even something you mentioned about the Coke bottle, like the person wanting that fizz and then going out and figuring something else to get that fizz. It's a really good way to promote entrepreneurship. And it's when talking to you, we really get that is you're really wanting people to do better.
Oh yeah. And hey, the more we can get it, the easier we can get stuff local, the more likely we can get it in bulk too. Right. And an affordable manner, because we're not paying, huge shipping costs from BC or something, right? Where the sort of that wasteless, mindful sort of movement has grown much bigger than here where we are. Quebec too, we see those changes happening, all over Quebec, right? And a lot of our products come from Quebec and BC because they're a lot more established, and a lot of it's population too, right? The more people you have, like the more ideas and stuff that foster, but and also the distances and stuff, right? Like it's hard when things are really spread out, but I do think that the demand will create innovation. So with that said, the refillery started with 1 employee and like some volunteer, and was open like 2 days a week, and now we're up at around like 7 to 10 employees. And so here's, all that to say, just because we're reducing waste doesn't mean that there isn't economic growth there. And this can carry into many other levels, not just here, but in the city level, having people working in those roles to do good and to find ways to reduce waste for the local community, I think needs to happen. It can't just come from people refilling bottles. It has to be much wider scale than that. And we're hopeful that we can inspire that a little bit. And the community members that shop with us are inspiring that every day, I think. So, yeah.
Well, on that note there, I'd like to say thank you for coming and talking to us. It's definitely been inspirational talking to you. And it's, I think you're 100% right. People making those little changes and doing the right things, that's the way to do it. Could you tell people who listen to this where you're at, how they can participate in this?
Sure. Yeah. So we're located at 227 Regent Street in Sudbury, Ontario. You can check us out online at www.thenickelrefillery.ca anytime, or on our social medias at Nickel Refillery. I think the best way to support this is to just start talking about it in your own community or wherever you're located. Look and see if you have a refillery already where you are. And if you don't, maybe you can start one. We're always helping people, and we've helped get a number of them opened in the north already. We were lucky that we were sort of the first ones in the northeastern Ontario to get going. And from that, I know that there's been a number of them that have started in the north as well. So we're really happy to collaborate with people and to help support that process. So yeah, I encourage people to reach out, and I just keep talking about it. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you
very much.
Wonderful.